Hi everyone, welcome back out here. We're still out here at the Sydney Fine Arts Center out here in Sydney, Nebraska, and I'm continuing on with our S104 Art of Flowers class. I'm going to be kind of posting about a lesson a week now as we head into the fall and head into the winter, and we do some of this real fun relaxed painting of Cauchois. Then we'll go into Franz Mortermann's, and then we'll go find some of your own styles and stuff. So I want to continue on some of those lessons. But Cauchois was a main, like I explained in the last video, he really changed my brush for the good several years ago. And I want to spend some time with you not only painting the acrylic one like we did in that pansy one right back there, but also I want to show you the global, and with some bristle brushes, some of his other type of techniques, you know, onto the next lesson. But before we do that, one of the things I promised you in the last pansy lesson was that I was going to show you how I apply some of those half tones and the tone painting, texture painting that Cauchois did in, that we did in the pansy lesson to some of the stuff that I'm going to do today. So I want to do a real fun little painting lesson with you, kind of an extra little thing, have some fun, get back into this again, and before we go over to do some more Cauchois and then to the big Franz Mortermann's, okay? Alrighty, so what I have here is, this is a 12 by 16. It's nice. I got it from Dick Blick. It's a Dick Blick panel, and it is a hardwood panel covered by the Belgian linen. So this is the one I have here, and I'm just trying some of this out. It's acrylic primed and medium texture, which is really kind of almost a fine portrait type texture. They call it a medium texture, but it's really kind of a nice fine texture. Not really super good for a Cauchois who does a lot of the dragging type of techniques, but I wanted to try this and try it on some of the halftones, and I just opened it up, and I'm just painting right directly from it this morning. So, let's give it a shot and see what happens here. For reference and stuff, I printed off some yellow and white roses here. When I do a photo like this, I don't try to copy anything. I just use it to capture some of the feeling. And some of you that were at the expo and we went through some of the floral things, you saw the one floral that I did on the long tray, and the Imogen roses, and how I try to, with those Imogen roses, how I try to just catch the feeling of it. I don't go into a copy mode because that can hurt you, especially when you're painting your brush kind of casual. So I'm not going to copy this photo at all. I'm just going to set it up here, and I'm going to use it for some reference to my flowers. I'm going to go acrylic today. I put out some of my acrylic colors. Since I have the yellow roses, I'm going to go with the three of my main painting yellows: my yellow Oxide, my Diarylide, and my Hansa. You could use Diarylide or Indian yellow, either one. Burnt Sienna, great toner. Pine green, my red, my Naphthol Red Light, my nice warm red. Phthalo Blue to help kick colors over to the other side there. And my cool colors, my Quinacridone Violet and my Red Violet, and of course a larger dollop there of the white. What I'm going to do first is just kind of relax my brush here. You could use a filbert, you could use you could use the stiffer synthetics and stuff for this. I'm going to go back to a number 8 fusion here for just a little bit, and just some water. I'm just going to use a little bit of water. I'm not going to use any extender because we're going to go mostly halftones. I'm going to grab my burnt sienna. This is a color I really like to sketch with. Now, normally I would pre-tone a canvas like this. I'm going to show you how I do a lot of my painting today. So reaching up and grabbing a reference of just one of the roses. I'm not going to do it too huge here for this canvas. I'm just going to kind of capture some of that shape, capture the gaze of the rose. The center is going to be more of an open center. She's going to gaze this way. So we'll have some of that. We'll have a larger little petal. I like that one gazing down there. I want one towards the center, right down in here towards the bottom, a little bit different, look to that. And we'll gaze up slightly with that. And then I'm going to come over here to the side, turn one a little bit more here, turn that so the center will go up higher here, and we'll grab some forward petals here. We'll turn that, we'll bring this around. So that'll give a good thing. And maybe we'll reach over and grab like an idea of one of those buds. We'll turn it on the side right down here. And that might make a nice composition of that, of those flowers there. I keep it very loose, very casual right now. Let's go back and set just a few ideas for shadow. I'll bring light in from the upper top here. It's coming in the photos coming from the top. So if I kind of keep that, not exactly the same way, but kind of keep that, that'll give me a good, allow me to really help me visualize my shadows a little bit better. So we'll do that. We'll leave that just like that. I'm going to, before I go block in some background, I'm going to kick in some brighter yellow. Now, I do this sometimes on a background where I leave the white through, and there's a feeling between the among artists is you leave that white so that that white intensifies any of the colors that you may want to keep into your painting. Now, we don't have to keep these colors at this particular intensity. We can drop it down, but the white increases the intensity here, and so it's always really good to start out kind of intense, especially a little bit more intense than you think you might want to have in the painting, because the you can always tone it down, and until you go really opaque and thick, you sometimes have a difficulty getting that, recapturing that intensity. So we'll put a little bit over here onto this bud. So this is, I know it kind of looks like a mess, but this is how I like to start them out. So it works really well. It works well for me. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is we'll have some leaves and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to come in, our leaves will be into our greens. I'm going to grab my 3/4 inch brush here. Let's grab a little pine and a little bit of that burnt sienna. I just love those colors together. Let's cool that down with a little bit of my Quinacridone Violet. Let's lighten that up with a bit of my white. And I get this kind of lovely grayish color, which I love to paint into my backgrounds. And let's just take that right into the flowers here, right into this area. And let's maybe add just a bit more violet to that here. And let's push that right back up here into the back. I'd choose the violet. Why did I choose the violet? Complements with the yellow. That makes beautiful paintings. Anytime that you paint complements, that makes beautiful paintings. So we'll paint some complements. We'll push a few other little colors in there. Remember, your acrylics like this, working like this, they're going to dry a little darker. Boy, this linen does feel nice under the brush here. And I'm using lots of paint. Notice all the paint I'm using. But your acrylics dry a little darker, so you take that into account when you're doing this. So my background will get a little darker. I might want to push a little more light into some of that, a little, if you push in, especially, we know our light direction is going to be right up here. We push some of that in, that makes it real pretty. And, take some of your yellows and push that back into the background. Maybe there's a little more going on back here. We have some of that. Let's just use some of that. Get some of those yellows in there. That's pretty. Let's get some more of this gray. I love to constantly mix my grays. I'm constantly mixing them so that they always vary just a little bit. That's what I look for. And this variation is just wonderful in your palette, into your painting. So you should always paint for variations. Don't work with one tone too long. You can make your painting flat and uninteresting and stuff. So work these different tones around, get different stuff going, I mean, these are, during the expo, these are a couple of paintings I did as demonstrations, real quick ones. And I just push color around. These are acrylic. Here's another one there. I did several paintings, real fast paintings, but pushing color around and pushing interest around and stuff it's a tremendous amount of fun just to try and play some things. That's what I love to do. And I love my students to do that too. My artist friends, I love them to try different things. So let's get going here. Let's put some of that yellow in. Let's get some of that light color in back down here. That's good. That nice light yellow. Push in a little bit of violet into that, into some of those colors. Work those around. This is not done. I'm going to work some more background colors, like I might work in some burnt sienna here, which is one of my favorites here. And let's head over towards some of the yellow-green side here. We haven't really pushed some of that in there yet. So you see, I don't want to create a rainbow or anything like that, but I just want to push some of this color around. Let's take some of that yellow-green and push that right up here, right up into that area. See, and it just makes a beautiful background. Sometimes I'll vignette it and leave it, not completely, covered in there and everything, but and sometimes I don't. I'm going to take some burnt sienna, and let's just splash that right through. I love this color, especially when I'm working with yellow roses, because it just looks like, just real toned yellow roses. Matter of fact, we can put a little bit of Diarylide into that and just kind of splash some of that around like that. And it just puts that color through our composition, pushes that through, gets that interest. This is very much more of the today they don't call themselves impressionists. We have impressionists, and there's still people who call themselves impressionists as they paint. But representational artists, big old long name, sounds really fun. But those are artists that don't paint exactly the line of realism, but they paint into a more casual nature into it. And that's more along the line of what I do today, too. I'm just going to toss in some more color. This is all pure acrylic that I'm working with. And part of the reason why I do all this is to, what I'm doing is I'm thinking about my painting, my technique, my colors here as I'm putting all of this on and working some of this. And I got some nice bright spots there that will really advance later on if I want them to. And I'll cover up a few little, just pick up a little bit of that green right with the yellow there and just kind of toss that around. Got rid of a few little holidays I had over there. Just kind of clean up your palette here, push that around. Just makes real fun colors here and interesting. And it's all about the same type of value, so I'm going to want to change some of that. And we'll do that as we get going in paint. We can do a little bit of that now. Let's do that. If I want to do that, I want to set the basically what we call a compositional shadow. I'm going to take some green and some of my darker cool color, which is my red violet. And this will make more of a what we call compositional shadow. And it is shadow from where the whole overall flowers are onto the painting here. Now, I want to keep some of that just a little more green here. Let's just push some of that right into here. And I'll push it right up and into the flowers a little bit, so in case I want to make some transparent edges and stuff like that. So you see, I start out really casual, very, very casual, sometimes a little more casual than Cauchois did into the painting. But as I get into the flowers, you'll see Cauchois technique that we did start to really show up here. And let's just restate some of that burnt sienna. I just love that coloring in there, to get that in there. Just movement, darks and movement, so I get a little bit more of a shadow side over here, a little bit more of a movement of my colors here. And of course, all this I can change and modify. It's all, it's like one of the things I said during the expo to everybody. I wanted them, we gave them paints and boards, you remember that? And I kept saying to you all the time, just paint, just try, just, push it. Paint's free today, just try it. And that's what we want you to do, is just to try it. Get brave with your paint, brave with your color, try some different things, expand your horizons, open your eyes to see painting in a new direction. And it's wonderful. It is absolutely wonderful what it does for you. It breaks some of those habits, those molds of habits that we get. Okay, so with that, I'm going to come back in here. Now I could use my favorite brush really to paint flowers with, especially on this side of canvas. This is my number 10. That is, you've seen me more than anything else. That's the one I used, and I went and grabbed myself a new one today, which is something I don't normally do, but I left painting my other one, so I have to go get a new one, all right? But so we'll start with this one here and try and see where we're going to go. All right, so I want to take some light color here, and I'm just going to drop it down, gray down here just a bit. I got to wait for some of this to tack up just a bit because it will be difficult to draw on. So following along the line of what Cauchois would do is set some of those petals and shapes of those outside shapes of the roses in here. I'll just set some in here using kind of white and a dirty brush here. And I'll kind of follow maybe along the line of that one. I'll take parts of that one and parts of the other one. I don't copy a flower because then I go into a copy mode and it gets real hard for me. But I'll make these short, choppier little motions of tones here to set that in. And see, I'll pick up a little green and a little other color. Isn't that kind of pretty on there? And I can pull in. I can also, put a little bit of yellow into my brush like this and pull out almost like a little, that tone, that darker tone, to shadow it out if I want to. But I'm just going to pull through and leave some of this. Now, Cauchois would, and one of the things I want to show you as we go to the other painting is a bunch of close-ups of his work, and he would just leave these juicy color strokes like this just onto the surface, and I like it. This is where I like to use the acrylics because you're not blending, you're just stroking heavy color into there, and it works so well. Let's come right along to the front here and stroke in a front forward leading petal here. That'll be pretty onto this one. Let's go back up and around, maybe tone that down just a bit here into some of my yellows and kind of follow that, just kind of pushing that around. Maybe pull a little bit of that in, just quick little strokes like that. And a little bit of this light color coming back and around here, kind of keeping the round shape to our rose that we've done so many times in so many lessons, but also keeping the brushwork very loose and open like Cauchois would. Let's come in and let's take some of our yellows and just soften right along the edge of that light color there like that, just pulling some of this right into that. Don't blend, just take some strokes right along. They're almost the same value, so they'll soften into each other, see? And, almost like a halftone. Now, I dug up some shadow underneath there, so I don't want it, so I'm going to pull some light back the other way there. But you see how that builds that up. I'm using very light pressure and very, very light pressure of the brush sitting over the surface. One of the reasons why I grabbed the Fusion, only because this hasn't tacked up. It's still, I put on a lot of paint and it's kind of wet. Let's state some burnt sienna, a little yellow, some deeper shadow colors again into that rose. Right here, burnt sienna, a little Diarylide. I love those two colors together. Let's come right into here and set in just a bit of those shadows. Maybe cool that off a bit too with a little bit of quinacridone, which would be appropriate. You could kill the intensity with a tiny bit of green because you're working pretty much into the complements there. So the tiny bit of green kills it, or tiny bit of blue. Any one of those would help kill the intensity of this a bit, which is what I want to do. So I'll grab a little bit more quinacridone, just toss it in there, unblended in. Now what I'll do is I'll come in maybe a little yellow oxide, maybe a little Diarylide, and I'll create a tone that's real close, right in between the light color I put on there and that dark color. That would be your halftone that you would use, and you just slide it over. Light pressure of the brush. If I want to reinforce the shadow, I'll pick up just a little shadow and set that back in. But I can wipe my brush there and soften by doing that. Now, if I want to soften more, I reach out to the light and I soften that color even more, you see? So you work tones like this, softening, just quick strikes. Try not to play in it. Try not to take more than, one or two little strikes with that color, or else you'll blend it, and we don't want to blend it here. Let's go down to a clean area, take some Hansa and some white, and let's take a light yellow strike right up here, which would be the top part of that rose here, top bowl of that rose, pointing up here slightly. And then we'll soften this down into some yellows. So I'll come over here to the side, make a little softer yellow that would sit softer, maybe a little more yellow oxide right here. and soften that. See, you're a tone painter. That's what Cauchois was. He was not a blender, he's a tone painter. Time for a new paper towel. Wipe some of those colors. Let's push some of these right up here into the back. Some pull down a bit. Get a little bit of that shadow into the brush is okay. And maybe put some light back to a little bit of a light edge here as I pull some of these down. Pull some of these down here like this. Around. That's kind of nice. Let's put a nice touch of that Diarylide right in there. Nice deeper yellow. That's kind of pretty. Maybe even a nice bit of the Quinacridone. Let's restate some Quinacridone. Just kind of push that back in there like that. Maybe work that around a bit. Don't do it too much. Just 1 or 2 strokes there. So you're just painting for movement. If you do it too much, you'll blend it. And we don't want to blend because that'll make it flat. Let's restate some light out here. That's kind of pretty. Pulling down, pulling towards that bowl area there. Maybe pull across the petal and pull down. But that sets some back petals in there, see, like that. Kind of finding the shape of the flower. Let's pull some sideways ones down here. Let's pick up a bit more white. Here, some sideways ones down like this. Sets that in. And maybe a bit across the front of this rose here where the light is. We'll set some light and just kind of casually paint that in. Let that sit there. We'll reach up here and grab some of the dark color and pull out. That's sending the shadow out, lifting off some of that light, just a bit of that light. We'll leave that light there like that. It's kind of pretty. We'll put a little more light right out here. Maybe just a bit more of that Hansa in it. Push some of that out there. That's kind of pretty. Let's put a lower, cooler Diarylide type petal right down in here. That'll help round out the rose, but we'll let this one set further down. Maybe just a bit of light on it, but let it sit further down in shadow, and that's kind of pretty. So part of this is, I'm looking at this thing and I'm making a plan. I talked a lot during the expo of making a plan for your paintings, how to make a plan for your paintings. And that's what I do, is I paint kind of with a plan all the time. So now I'm getting smaller and more detailed to my petals here. And I might add a few other little turning ones here that turn up and around, and other little movements here that support that center. I might restate that back in here just a bit more, opening up that center just a touch more there. And let's put a little bit of that cool color right down in here too. So you can just state it in there and it looks good. Cauchois would do it. And that looks pretty good with a quick stroke like that. That's how he painted, these real quick jabbed strokes of color, sometimes really, really juicy, so those colors would not blend, but they would model together. That's where I got a lot of my modeling techniques that you see me do in so many of my videos and books and everything, the modeling that I do. So we'll just soften that out. That's kind of pretty. And we'll put a little bit more of an edge right here. Put that petal in there, maybe slice a petal more towards the edge there. Maybe hit a little shadow right on the top of it, set that in. Let's set a little cool shadow right up underneath it. So I'll use those shadows to even help, set those petals a bit. I'm going to let this tack up for just a touch, just a minute here, and go over and let's work on this one. Let's change its colors up a little bit more yellows, not quite as much white on it. So we'll build through the centers here with more yellows, down to my yellow oxides and Diarylides together. Maybe even touch into a bit of my Quinacridone here, so I get more of that cooler reddish type color. Let's push that around a bit. And remember, we have other techniques like negative painting. Now, when I do that, I also like to come in and add a little bit of that to some outside areas or back areas of the other petals on the other rows. That will create harmony between the two roses here. And let's take a bit of our light, not quite as light as I did on the other one, and let's just kind of marry these two together, one underneath the other here. So I'll push a little lighter here on this one to make, I want this one to be the one on top, the queen here. So I'll marry these together here just a bit, kind of entangle their petals just a touch here, overlapping. And we want this one to lean back, so we'll start a little light here. Let's get a bit more quinacridone and some of my cooler color. Let's kill the intensity with just a bit of the green because I'm on a back flower, right? Let's push that into the center back here a bit and right down into our shadow part of our rose here. There we go. So I just try to capture the feeling of the roses. I'm not copying them. But I'm also applying a little bit more light source to it than what you might see in a photo. Photos are great for inspiration and reference, like what I'm using here. But to copy them, they, sometimes depending on the camera settings, all the photos will have, all the roses will have the same intensity and stuff. And you don't always want that in a painting, so it's good to vary some of that. So we'll just drop some of this out. I'm just going to take that edge here and just drop that in there like that. That's kind of pretty. Let some of it die away real fast. And I'm just kind of looking in here as a rose, these two, and even this one here as a rose turns, how I want to angle these petals just a touch out here like this. And you look at one like that, how it comes around maybe a bit more light there. Pick that up on the brush so I can make more of a defined mark of that coming down. Let's soften that right back here with a stroke. Push it into a shadow right there. That'll be nice. How would the petals across the front? And you see the petals across the front of a flower like this one here. It's pretty defined right across. It's almost a straight line, and I don't want to do it quite as straight as you see there in the photo, so I'll bend it just a touch. Big old shadow there coming off of this one side there, though, because that petal is so high, it's shadowing back on that one, and I might not want to have that in there. That's might be a bit distracting. If I was doing a full floral, like a still life of it, yeah, I might do it, but here, I'm not going to worry about that too much. Let's just put the side of this in. We'll reach up and grab one of those side petals from another rose here. Just kind of push that in. Maybe the idea here of this one turning, the idea of a petal there, like that. And a little inside, a little darker inside here, turning. Some marks there. That's kind of nice. A little bit of light out here. Not very light, just a little bit too light. Let's tone that down just a bit. Maybe a bit of my cool shadow color there. Push that in there. That keeps that rose turned to the back there. Sometimes I'll just shove that off or lose the edge of that, which Cauchois didn't really touch it with his fingers too much, but we can. But see, I'm working in real quick jabs of tones, and I love to do that. And painting Cauchois and learning Cauchois really helped me, learn the tones, seeing the tones and paint like this. Try to mix a tone and paint with it, and then try not to repeat it too many times as you're working around the painting. Move those tones. You don't want to get it too much here. Paint too long with one tone, because that will, in a lot of senses, isolate the, just create a flatness to your flowers, because everything's the same. So, it's very easy to paint in one tone And so you want to try to avoid it. It's very easy to slide into it, though. Paint with one tone. Too long. So as we come around to the other side, I'll head over my Diarylide, some of my Quinacridone Violet. I'll drop a little in here. Maybe I just let the whole edge here get lost. Sometimes let's take a little water and a little green and a little bit of our Sienna colors and just drop some of that right into there and just let that whole back edge there just kind of soften out, fade away. And we might do some negative painting in there. You know, I might come in here with some green, maybe a bit of my Quinacridone, not my Red Violet because that's the darkest, but just do some negative painting here like I showed you before and set the back edge. Now Cauchois would let just a lot of things just fade away and just into strokes, but I do like the negative painting, and sometimes just pulling out and blurring that edge like that. I do like negative painting for what it does. As I get into the center of interest, I might use that green and red violet, which I have in my brush now, because it is, see, it's a little darker. It's cooler, it's darker, it's more contrast, and that's what I would use right in here like this to set the real dark tones that I want in that shadow area right there of the painting. Okay, but outside out here, you know, I might use more of my Quinacridone, some of my other tones here, and I'll just lightly whisper some of that out here. Just move some of that tone around here. And I just love to work some of those around. There we go. Let's just drop that right up there like that. Boom. Maybe a touch more light here. Right in there. Just kind of scrub that around a bit. Those marks of color just add so much to the painting itself. I do want to do a bigger, more floppy petal down here than what I have. So this makes the rose different than some of the other roses I paint. Get that bigger, floppier, outside, older, mature petal on the rose. Down a bit here. And let's just drop this one in. I'll just let that dirty green sit in there and let that just become part of that flower here. I just love that. Just the colors are starting to dry up right in here, and it gets sticky. When it gets sticky, that's when I really love to paint on it, because the stroke sticks wherever I put it, and it's when you have the ultimate control. If I work with the globals, I don't get that sometimes for an hour or so, but when I work with the acrylics, it can happen pretty quickly as it's drying, and I like that. Now I'll just drop in a bit more, and we'll just let some of that fade away out here. I'll restate it if I need to, but that makes a nice soft, with some of that green in the brush there, that makes a nice soft different color here for this rose. And I'm just watching that, so I might make another slightly floppy petal there. So if you notice, I don't touch the Cauchois type technique quite as much as I do some of the other ones there, and that's just something I do. Because I like it to be the mark. I like to brush marks more than just the pushing of my flowers. And sometimes, you know, I push my flowers around, and I get so used to doing that instead of good painting technique, of, you know, tone technique, that I just kind of push stuff around. And I feel that these are good mechanics, not only for your hand, but for your eye. So we need to do them to learn that. Try to keep your finger out of your painting, which, you know, I had some friends painting here for the last week of the expo, and, you know, I told them we're going to do painting today with no finger, and they all about died, because at first, you know, we would, you know, we painted for the longest time, and to get them to touch their fingers, like, oh, I don't want to touch my fingers, it's dirty. Now, a couple years later, say, let's not touch your finger, and everyone has, you know, almost a heart attack, because we're so used to touching our painting. So it's good to paint some of these variations. Here I'm just adding some cool and softening it out just a bit. But it's good to paint these variations, and that keeps your techniques in good shape, keeps everything about you as an artist in good shape, good form, where you don't have to, you don't rely on one thing too much or too often. Here, that's pretty good there. Just some nice movements there to that. Okay, so let's go down. Let's paint this other one here. Move this up just a bit here. And we'll apply a little quinacridone, a little bit of burnt sienna here, right down into more of the center. Kind of just tap and spin that around there. Let that come out around there like that. And let's go into some Diarylide and some Hansa, model that up, and just kind of spin that around, tapping that around here. So what we're doing is just creating the movement around the center of this rose here. That's pretty good. Now we'll go just touch into some of our light, and let's put some of the light strikes of the petals that are going to intertwine here of this one into that one. Here, let's just pull that down. This is nice and dry, so these strokes sit very solid light here. And let's pull one right in there. Pull that in, kind of watching that one and this one, turning that one on the side a bit as to how I would stroke something like this. Putting in the petals, finding that nice center there. Coming around to this side here. That looks kind of good. So the rose is sitting up just, up higher a little bit. Let's take a little Diarylide and just come right along those edges there. That takes away a little bit of the whiteness to it. Change our paper towel. Maybe a bit of our Diarylide and pink, or quinacridone here, and the quinacridone gold and the boy, did I confuse that all up. Burnt sienna and quinacridone violet. Let's do that again and push that around just to catch some of that extra soft movement of the rose and a little bit of the light color to help move that around. Maybe a touch or an idea. I don't paint petals as much as I paint, like you've heard me say, movement, movement, movement. And this is not easy for those of you that are, newer painters. This is but you know what? I'm a firm believer of challenging challenging you a lot, pushing you to do new things. There's so many people that say, there's so many people out there, and that's one of the things at the expo I said right away. First, I can't do it, does not belong in my classroom. I don't tolerate it, because there's a lot of things that I have difficulty with, but I never say I can't do it, because it puts that mental block in your brain and you never will do it. So never say I can't do it. It just takes practice. It takes time. That is very important. And never insult your work. Just never do that. Artists don't do that. Craft painters do that. Artists don't insult their work. Never insult your work. And it's, I had one lady that in one of my classes that called everything she paints a bunch of junk. And I took her to the side and I said, if you say that one more time, I'm going to actually remove you from the class, because I cannot have that type of attitude happen into the class. And that's something you should always remember. It is difficult. We are learning. And for some of you trying this, you're not going to be able to do it the first time. If it's a good technique, you're not going to be able to do it the first time. You're going to take some practice. That's all it's going to do. After 25 or 50 roses, maybe you get a better shot at it, an understanding to it. But you can certainly do it. This takes time. Takes practice. It takes, fortitude to do it, to get up and practice that. There's nothing, beautiful art takes time to learn it. I don't believe in talent. I believe in practice. I know. So here I'm just kind of spinning it around and adding a little bit of light, building the petals out a bit more. I want to build this one out a little bit more, cover up this one just a touch. I'm going to sink him back behind there. That's going to give a better shape. See how it pushes that rose out almost to a better rounder shape to it. So I like that. And I'm going to push a little more light out here onto this one. See how I just stroked that? Now I got a darker value right in there. I might try to leave that as a shadow, but I need a half tone down into my yellow oxides, maybe a touch of burnt sienna, maybe a touch of green and violet there, just to tone it, just a touch. And I need that in there to help that shadowing of it. And let's just toss some of that movement right down here onto that side. Maybe toss a little cooler movement there, a little quinacridone and a little burnt sienna. Maybe kill that with just a bit of green. Let's toss a little bit of that shadowy movement back in there. Oh, I so want to touch that with my finger, but I'm not going to. And let's just create the halftone yellow right into that. Push that around. See how fast that happens? Now I go a halftone again lighter, or even a full tone. You know, go a full value, 2 values lighter, and come around and do a little bit of drawing some of the petals out like this. Just set a ring of petals out here. Don't get too specific because you're out on the shadow, the lost side of the rose here. So don't get too specific with it here. So you see the shadow side of that. That works pretty nice. And that's a pretty good, overall, that's a pretty good looking rose there for that side. Let's maybe curl up this petal just a bit, make it look like it's folding over and in, and that's kind of a pretty little rose there. Now I'm going to go back and revisit this little lady up here and give her just a touch more light right around that center, maybe a little half tone of yellow darker here right around that center. That's nice. Maybe a touch more light on that warmth over here on striking that edge of that petal there. A bit more right here. Striking the edge of that one. That's kind of nice. Maybe a little bit more. Let's go half-tone yellow right down in here. Pulling that down to the center. Then some of that cool. Let's just restate that coming back out. Nice movement there into that one. So I always like to revisit one of the roses, some of the early roses in the painting. Let's revisit some light color right out here. Push that in and out and over to my cools and yellows. Nice half tone in there of that. There. That's kind of pretty. Let's find an edge here of a petal. And there is one on that one right there. So let's find that edge that will help that rose come around on that side. Kind of turn it around, lift this edge, and this will also push down that bottom petal a bit more. There we go. Bit of texture on that. Do you see that? Nice texture. We'll lift out that halftone shadow, maybe a little deeper shadow. Right into all 3 of those. Nice little shadowy tone. Let's lift that right into that. Right into there. That sits nice. Push some of that out. Now I'll wipe my brush. Now I'm going to slide right up to my yellow tone. A little bit more yellow, a little bit lighter. And that'll be the half tone as it's coming to the light. So I'll strike that twice there. And then we'll go right back to the light and pull that down and through. And that'll push that light right up into that. Give a nice look, maybe a touch more Hansa white kind of modeled here. And we'll hit that edge there and really push that petal up on top. Isn't that kind of nice? It's just an all value paint. Don't play around. It's like in Cauchois, when you're painting Cauchois, and what we did with those pansies, we don't play around with those colors. We look at the tone and we restrike the tone. Whatever that tone is that we need to get that effect, that's what we strike again And so you can, even with me just squirting out the nice acrylics like this, I can get a nice look to the roses here without blending. Just striking the tones and letting the optics of it, come out. Let's put a half tone right in there. Like that. That's kind of neat. Let's head that a little more yellow. So a little Hansa right into that. Push that in there. Now let's go a little lighter back down through that again. See? And don't stroke it too many times. Let's get the nice light on the edge of this petal. I like to revisit my first petals. Always, I'm just going to stroke some more light here. I always like to revisit them again. Get some of those light colors, some of that movement. Let's kind of weave these petals together here, getting this one nice and light. It's hitting the light, coming right up to this one. It's kind of like hard to tell which one is on top there, which is kind of what I want to do on this. I want to weave these together just like that. So those look real close together in the light. Let's push this one just a bit lighter right there. A little texture on that is good. It brings that whole side of this rose closer to the light source. And let's put right in there, we could use a little softness, so let's go right with a half tone. Maybe lift out. Boom. Put another load in and lift out. And see how nice that sets that shadow in there. So many times when I'm working away from the light, I'll start the halftone and lift out. That works best. I'm a technique painter. That's what I do. I paint techniques. And I look at a painting and see what it needs, see where it's got to go according to my visualization or my plan, what I think is my idea for the painting. And then I'll find some techniques that I can do that will help me achieve that particular look. Here I'm just going to, I pulled that petal right across and I'll just hit it like that to make it look like it's a little rolled petal there. Maybe a half-tone shadow cooler onto the back side here, rolling it down. So that's what that'll look like. And that looks pretty good. And let's go over here. Quickly state in a bit of light, not very light, a bit of light right up into the front of this. We'll just make this a nice little rosebud here. Let's take a cool quinacridone, burnt sienna, a little of our yellow oxide, cooler color down to the bottom. Let's green that just a bit because it's a bit bright. So we'll green gray that, a little more yellow oxide. Let's strike right over that. See, that's a better toned color for that. That's a beautiful toned color that we might want to push some into our background here as well, into a bit of places. I love to do that towards the end of the painting especially. So we'll set that in. That's kind of nice. Let's just set a little bit of that as a shadow down here. We don't have to do too much to this to make it look like a rosebud because we've already painted roses. And if we paint any kind of oval shape here, it'll look like a rosebud. And the Impressionists knew that, so they don't do too much of it. I mean, you don't need it to do a tremendous amount of petaling or any of that kind of stuff to make it look like a rosebud. We could put a bit of a edged petal out here. It makes it look, it gives it a bit more shape right there, like that. And let's put an edged petal, bit lighter, not any lighter than say this one here. You know, you don't, let's just put an edged petal here and maybe here. And then that's just about all that needs for that beautiful rosebud there. Casual rosebud. We'll soften the outside edges here. Just like that. Let it blur down. Makes it look like a nice little rosebud. Let's take some pine green, some burnt sienna. I love to be on the burnt sienna side with this. Maybe a touch of red violet to cool that. And darken it. That's why I chose the red violet. Let's add just a... You can put on some septals or something like that if you want, but I'm just going to get casual with it. Let's come out here, do just a little negative painting into the rose, pull down. That's kind of pretty. love that burnt sienna and that pine green, and then you toss in either the quinacridone or the red violet. Don't get it too mixed. It just looks wonderful as it comes off your brush with these colors like this. It's just wonderful. Let's put just a touch lighter up here, grayer, greener, some of that. Now those make those grayed greens like that. Let's get it just a touch lighter here. They make beautiful grayed, like leaves, the oval shapes of your leaves here. And time for a new paper towel here. And if we're doing Cauchois, we would take a bit more of that light color and maybe even a touch more green here. And we would just hit half of that leaf with that lighter color. And let's just gray out half of it there. That would be more of Cauchois. I like to just hit it with my finger a bit, but we don't do that. So can't do that. So, but I just did. But I don't really do that. You can thin it out. So, you know, that's the one thing is you can thin out your colors. And he would use his solvents to thin out his oils. And you could use those around, just kind of get some of those sienna colors in there and, you know, move around a bit. You could use that to negative paint like that. Casual up a bit. Come around. Toss in some more green kind of movement there. It makes it real pretty. And I want to get some of the green and burnt sienna and the violet there. And let's set in a couple of our stems here. Ideas of stems. I love those. Pushing through the composition here. A little more burnt sienna. Maybe give the idea of a thorn or two. I love those into the paintings, into the roses here. Find some green colors that you like. I like the burnt sienna and green, and then to cool it every once in a while, especially down here. Add a little bit more red violet down here. Get those leaves cooled off, shadows off here. Put in some small, even heading towards more of your yellows, burnt siennas and yellows, small little leaves here. The young leaves of the rose that are the orangier colors here. You can start some of those here. I like them more of a jagged edge like that. But, you know, just have some fun with them. I almost imagine like a little S and jagged it up a bit like that. It makes pretty. Makes them nice. Drop some in like they're there behind the roses. Mix up some of your greens in that as well. Change it. Change your color. Don't make too many leaves, too much of the same color for too often, and you know, don't hit your petal like that, Dave. And you'll need to put in some light ones as well. Some you know, some light struck leaves here. But get some of this variation, some of this movement out here like this, moving out. You know, sometimes I come out here with some techniques and just like put another leaf, just a leaf shape that starts out like this. It's like it's moved out and there's another leaf. Sometimes I'll just take some of this dirty, toned, cool, kind of yellowish color and push that around back there like there's some other rose back there. And it's all pretty. Try to get it done efficiently and pretty quickly, because that's what they did. Get it done pretty quick here. There we go. Let's get a little lighter strikes of some leaves in here. And that's basically to show that there's light strikes of color. So let's get these up here. Let's restate some of these up here. A little lighter strike. Vary my colors a bit more. Maybe a strike of that right in through here. There's another leaf right there. cool it just a touch, bit more green, and come off to this side with just a bit of that color. Maybe back down over here, maybe a little bit more yellowish color. Down here. Love it. Love just to paint like this. Casual and nice. Use that to shape up some of your flowers. Some of those greens. You know, you could really darken that down. Back in some of that red violet, pine green, and some burnt sienna here. And really create some back contrast back up there. Now that pulls your eye too much away from that one, so I'll just shove some green into it, push it and bring it, then reduce the contrast back, see? And I'll just keep shoving green into it till I see that contrast come back. And I like to do that, so, but I like to have a little bit of that contrast. But let's bring it back in here. Let's bring that contrast right back up in here. That's kind of pretty. And let's bring that right back in here a bit. Push down just a bit of that light green I used. And let's push some of that green right into that. That's just good contrast there. Bit of that dark green and violet, burnt sienna. And let's just drop some right in here. Nice contrast right there. So you got this line of contrast now coming through your leaves and right through to your flowers. It's kind of pretty. Those violets. Now, see, we have this violet color that's coming in through there. Now, you know, that's one of the things that you should consider into your painting is coming right over here, grabbing some of this green and this light violet, maybe hitting a little yellow in there so you're not too cool. Here, grab some of this real light, soft violet and hitting that onto the sides of some of your flowers here. Just little pushes of it, little touches of it. It's cool, it's light, it picks up that background really nice, and gives a nice color variation and contrast to your flower. And Cauchois did this kind of stuff. Let's drop it down, let's tone that down, drop it just a bit here. And just hit a little bit here, not so it's dirty. Just too much green and it'll get dirty on it. Just real quick, light, just a bit of that hitting right down there. That's pretty. Let's hit just a touch down in there. You can even hit a strike or two here on some of your leaves just to carry that around. But that makes a real light, you know, casual painting there. Maybe just a touch lighter, yellower on just a few of our light side leaves there, so we capture that light. I'm always watching the light. I'm a painter of light. I'm always watching the light through my painting, how it works through my painting. So very important, especially to the consistency and movement of it. So I could push a little bit more light through some of these areas here, just a bit more. I don't want to make it too bright. It will conflict with my roses and stuff, but just some of that light through, and that works really, really well. Little touches of color. I love the little splashes of burnt sienna coming around. Quick little jabs of it around the painting just do wonders. Just sparks of interest and color around. I used to be really afraid to do this. Now I just attack it. I love it. Just fun. But there you got it. And 59 minutes. We got it under an hour. So set yourself a goal like that. Try that. You see, it's not quite as involved as Cauchois' technique of halftones and pushing and pulling, warms and cools and everything like we did in the last lesson. And, you know, you can do it with a synthetic. You get more spring. But when I use the colors kind of like this, I like also that fusion. So, you know, something like this. Try that, you know, working of it. Try not to work one tone too long. That's really important. Okay. Try not to overwork your palette too much. keep your yellows and your violets and your greens and stuff kind of separated a little bit. And if you notice, my color tones here are pretty clear. You don't see me working and blending them together. You see kind of clear indications of those tones, and that's just so very much important. All right? Have a good time with it. Thanks for joining me. We're going to continue on. By next week, I'm going to have the next Cauchois lesson up. I'll post a pattern and the prep and everything for that. And we're going to be attacking that one this time with some bristles and with some global colors and having a whole heck of a lot of fun. We'll use some synthetics and some bristles, and we'll have a whole heck of a lot of fun with that. Then I'll apply that to another lesson that I do, or what I do today with some of that. And then we'll head into playing with Franz Mortemann's. We got a lot to do, and I got another Franz Mortemann's paintings I just completed this last week right up over here. So I'll share some of that with you. Okay? We have a lot going on, and let's get going on it. Let's paint through this fall, especially some of these colors. These are kind of like perfect fall colors. All right, I'll see you on the next weekend, or see you this next weekend with the next lesson. Bye-bye.